We are now on Daf Yud Zayin Amid Beis. On the top line, Rav Huna found the stira between two psukim. Ksiv, David HaMelech is L'shabeach Hashem, and he says, God, Tzaddik Hashem b'chol dracha. God is a tzaddik. Tzaddik is Miloshen Tzedek, otherwise known as Mishpat. It's always emes, and it doesn't lend itself to any flexibility. God is straight emes, and that's called tzaddik. Uksiv, but then the pasuk says the chassid b'chol masa, and that means minhag chasidus. So how do we reconcile this? And Rav Huna answers, "B'tchila, at the very beginning, HaKadosh Baruch Hu goes with straight justice, kitzadik, emes, no compromises, no leniencies, lelo pshar, but levasof." When God realizes at the end that man cannot possibly survive, it's going to be an olam of emes v'tzedek. Therefore, chassid, God is misnayeg b'midas ha'chesed v'arachmim, what we call lifnim mishur sadeh. Rabbi Elazar Rami, he brought up a stira, ksiv, with regard to the reward and punishment that God will bestow upon his creatures. It says, ulecha Hashem chased. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is noeg b'midas ha'chesed, which means lifnim mishur sadeh. But on the other hand, ksiv, that God will punish a person based on his action. So Rav Elazar answers, B'tchila, initially, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he thinks he can be knowing him with the bida of ki ata tishalim ki ma'aseu, which means midas adin ulbasol. When he realized that there's no kiyum b'din, then ulcha Hashem chased, which means lifnei rishus hadin. Ilfei, that's the name of a Talmud Chacham. The Amila to say was Ilfa. Rami, he had a different stira. Ksiv, it says with regard to the Shlosh Midas Arachim Rav Chesed, which implies that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is noeg b'midas ha'chesed lifnei rishus hadin. Uksiv, but on the other hand, it says va'emes, which means that God's judgment is emes without any vitur. There's no, God is not going to be appeased. He wants emes. The answer is betchila. When God thinks he can simply keep the world going with a mid of emes, myself, eventually it becomes quite clear that he needs to add the midah of lifnim mishur sadeh. Now we're going into the Shlosh Midas Arach. Vayavar Hashem al panav vayikra. Rabbi Yochanan is a very famous gemara about slichos. Ilmole mikra kosu yefshali omer. If the Torah hadn't said it, we couldn't have said it. Milame, this pasuk is teaching me. It says Vayavar shenisate v'kadosh baruch hu kishliach tzibur. It just like a shliach tzibur covers himself with a talis, and then he's over Lufnei Teva, so to HaKadosh Baruch Hu is mitzatev with a talis. The herald of Moshe Seder Tefillah. Now the Kabbalists, I think, derive from these words that God prays, which shouldn't shock us because the Gemara says that God was tefillin, so it makes sense that he would pray. And God now demonstrates to Moshe the highest, most lofty prayer, and that's the Seder HaTefillah of Shlosh Midas Arachim. And it's interesting, it's called Seder HaTefillah. My Rebbe used to always point out that this is deliberate. Seder HaTefillah means the way we structure slichos is a Seder HaTefillah. We start with Shevach, then we go to Bakosha, then we go to Hodoya. The Amalom, and God turns to Moshe and he says to him, Kol Zman Yisrael Chotim, when the people will sin, Yachzor Lefanei Seder Hazeh. And Rashi says this is a reference to Tainus on a public fast day. They should repeat the Slichos, Bani Mochelem, and God says, I promise that I will atone for their sins. Hashem Hashem, the first two words of the Yud Gimel Midas Harachamim. Aniu kodem she'ech to adam, aniu li'achar sheyech adam yasid tshuva. The Gemara establishes that there are two categories of racham. There's rachamim for man before he sins, but he needs a special attribute of rachamim after he sins. And that rachamim is dependent upon tshuva. Kel racham v'chanu, Om Rabbi Yehuda bris krusa l'shlosh midos shenem chosros breaka. That when Klal Yisrael recite the Yud Gimel Midos on a tinus, they won't walk out of there empty-handed. God will respond. Shenever hine anochi koreis bris. On the 13 Midos of Rachamim, there's a bris. A bris is an absolute commitment. And God is committed that I will respond to that tefillos when they will mention the Yud Gimel Midos of Rachamim. Rabbi Yochanan Gedolah, Tshuva, Shemakaras, Zardino, Shel Adam. Even if it's already after the final judgment and the decree has been issued, Lira'ah, if a man does tshuva, even at that late stage, is Nikra Zardino, it would be ripped up. Shenemar in the Tochacha, which HaKadosh Baruch Hu sent Yeshaya to convey to the people of Israel, Hashmein Lev Ha'am Hazeh, V'aznav Hachbeit, Ve'enov. What is this next word here? It's a little erased in my book. Ve'enov Chosha. Ve'enov Chosha. And you're Ve'enov U'Aznav Yishma U'Levovo Yovin V'Shav V'Rafal. So the emphasis here is on the word V'Rafal. And V'Raf indicates that it's even after the Gzar Din. He's already a cholim. He's already suffering in bed as a result of his sins. He writes here, Leiv ha'am hazeh holich haloch ve'hashmein machmidim es libam leval yovin es tochos hanavim v'azneim holchos fedos milishmoa ve'neim holchos v'nistamos miliros shem nimnoim milishmoa divrei anov mishum shem yireim shema yutvu beineim dvarav yavinu b'libam v'yashuvu elai. So from the fact that it says V'shav v'rafalo, you see clearly that through tshuva, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will be soleach for the sins, even after he's already ill, meaning even after the Gzar Din was issued. There'll be a kriya with an ayin kriya of Gzar Din. Amalei Rav Papal Abaye, the Dilma Lifnei Gzar Din, Amalei v'rafalo, basic Davar Shitzak Refuah. So the fact that it says Ruffalo is clear-cut proof that it's describing a situation in which he's already a choler, and that's after the Gzar. Is it really true that God will rip up a Gzar Din after it's already been issued, and that's how powerful tshuva is? Is that really so? The Brisa says, Hashav bein tayim, if a person does tshuva between Rosh Hashana and Yom Kippur, mochalin lo, but lo shav bein tayim, if he didn't do tshuva during the 10 days of tshuva, zafilu hevi kol ele nevoyos, sheba olam, ein mochalin lo. Even if he would bring the finest elim, rams in the world, nevertheless, he does tshuva v'yein mochlin lo. It's too late. After Yom Kippur, it's too late. It's already the Gzvar Din. And so bring all the great, beautiful animals in the world for karbanos and do your tshuva. It's not going to help. And Rabbi Yochanan just established that Gedol Tshuva Mekaras, Zardino Shalom. How do we reconcile this? And the Gemara answers, Lo kasha ha'biyachid ha'betziv. And I'm going to offer the original interpretation, but the Gemara is going to change it a little later on. But initially, Tzibur means a group of people. We're not talking about an individual, but a collective whole. In the case of an individual, even though he does tshuva, his tshuva can only be meaningful to change the Gzar Din before the Gzar Din was issued, but not afterwards. But in the case of a tzibur that does tshuva, there will be a kriyas gzar din even after the gzera was issued, and that's the power of the tzibur. However, I have to tell you, I was a bit, I don't want to say disappointed, but the Masechet says that liyochid kosher lis ormeil v'lashes blocks of the tshuva. The Gemara is not making a fundamental distinction between the Yochid and the Tzibur. He says just that you don't anticipate that the Yochid is going to do tshuva. It's too challenging, too difficult. So therefore, we can't be koreh the gzar din of a Yochid because we don't really have any faith that he'll do tshuva. But in the case of a Tzibur, shav b'tshuva, one person's more his friend, and it goes on and on like a ripple effect. And there will be genuine tshuva. Therefore, Rabbi Yochanan insists that be a kriya with an ayin of gzar din meisvei. Have another kash on Rabbi Yochanan. It says in the Torah regarding Eretz Yisrael, Dvarim Yudal Talmid, Einei Hashem Elokecha Ba Mirishis Hashana V'Yad Acharis Shana. HaKadosh Baruch Hu's mashgiach on Eretz Yisrael from the beginning of the year till its end to see what the world needs and to mechadish gzeros. And the Bryce explains when it says here that Hashem is mishanek gzeros from the beginning of the year till the end, we should understand that itim, that the periods of time at the end of the year, litova. Litova means lahakel aleha me'aparonius. So there was a gzera on Rosh Hashana, and then God sometimes alleviate that harsh decree. However, there are other times itim l'ra'ah, that God will diminish the tova that was promised to them on Rosh Hashanah. And now the Brisa analyzes these categories. Itim litova ketzad. The gzera that was sealed on Rosh Hashanah was, I'll have a very limited amount of geshem, because at that moment in time they were Rishon. Now they did tshuva. L'sof means in the middle of the year. Chazru ben, they did tshuva. Hashem says the following: I'm in a bind, so to speak. We're entering into, if I could say, Kaviyachol, the mindset of God. Lahosef aleim, to add new rains, efshar. That would violate the rules. Sekar nigzag zera. In other words, the gzera was that there'll be very, very limited volume of rain. So I can't change that and add rain. But what can I do, says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, without undermining the original gzera? El HaKadosh Baruch Hu moridon bismanon al ha'oretz hatzricholen. God will make sure that the rains that we need for planting will fall in the right places. Al sodos, kromim, viginos. However, there are other parts of the face of the globe, like there are forests and wilderness, deserts. There I can't, nothing's going to change because there's no purpose in adding rain over there. Everything depends upon the agricultural potential of that particular land. The other way, they were tzaddikim, and God declared and signed a decree that this year will be a multiple rain, multiply the rains. But now they went off with chayt. So God says, Livchos mehem yefsh, I can't reduce and diminish the volume of rain, shekfar nigzah gzera. The gzera was already issued. So what can I do in this case that they don't deserve such ample rain? He'll bring it down when it's not a good time. It's not going to help the growth of the grains in the fields. It's going to be out there in the forests and the deserts that there's no toelis. In any event, this brisa clearly contradicts Rabbi Yochanan, who said the tshuva of the tzibur is meaningful to be koreh the din. We see there's no way you can be koreh the din. So therefore, if let's say they changed their ways l'tova, they were Rishayim on Rosh Hashana, the gzeira was that they will have very little rains. Why, according to Rabbi Yochanan, Kadosh Baruch Hu shouldn't have to play games over here. You know, all right, that small amount of rain, that volume will go here and go there when they need it and so forth. He just should simply koreh the din, according to Rabbi Yochanan. And then he could add plenty of rain. So why does the Brisa say I can't add the rains because they were already exar din? So Gemara answers Shani Hasam the efshar b'hach. You're right. If all things are all doors are closed, and God has no choice, so to speak, but to undermine the original Gzar Din, then for the sake of the tzibur, the tshuva, God will do so. But if it's efshar b'hach, meaning we could be Mekayim, God could be Mekayim, the original Gzera of the limited amount of rains when they were Rishayim, and now they did tshuva, and God could still solve the problem without having to undermine the Gzera by, as we said before, taking that small amount of rain and putting it in the right places at the right time. Then we're not going to be Mavat, God is not going to be Mavat to the Gzar Din. If it's Efshar, if there's no other possibility, then God is Koreh the Din, as Rabbi Yochanan said. Another question on Rabbi Yochanan, Toshma. Now, this is the parak in Tehillim for Birchas Hodah, our Arba Tzrichim Lahodos. Yordei Ayam bi Onios Osim Malachim b'Mayim Ravim. Hema Ro Ma'aseh Hashem Niflos Mitzula Vayomer. Vayamed Ruach Si'or Vatromeim Galov Yachogu Vianu Keshikar V'Chol Asam Tisbalo. Vayitzaku El Hashem Batzar Lahem Yodu Hashem Chaz. So we're talking about the sailors, and it's a very dangerous situation. But they were saved from, let's say, a storm or so forth, and they cried out to Hashem when there was a storm, and then God responded and saved them. Yodu Hashem Chazdo. So David HaMelech also lehem simonios. Simonios means like a nun hafucha. It's very similar to achim v'rakim shebetorah. So David HaMelech, when he wrote this chapter of Tehillim, chapter 107, he added nunim hafuchim, what we would call brackets, between each pasuk. And you should darshan them ka'achim v'rakim betorah, as if you had written between each pasuk an ach or a rak, which is a miut, and these simonios are going to substitute for ach for rak in order to be mamayit hatzola that's mentioned in the psukim. Lo melech. Saku, if they cried out for salvation, kodem zardin nanim, then God will respond. But saku liachik marzin ein nanim. There will be no response. Now, in this case, we're talking about Rabin. There are plenty of people on the boat, on the ship. And yet, that tshuva is not effective after the Gzar Din. That's against Rabbi Yochanan. You made a mistake. Where Rabbi Yochanan said that there's no problem being Koreh Gzar Din, and he was referring to a tzibur, he meant mamash tzibur, not a bunch of a collection of individuals. But the tzibur, the klal yisrael. Toshma, another question on Rabbi Yochanan. Shalab Loria Gioris Es Rabbi Gamliel. She asked the following question: Ksiv b'toraschem asher lo yisa panim. The Kodesh Baruch Hu doesn't give any favoritism. He's not no say panim for anyone. Uksiv, but yet it says in Parshas Noso in the Birchas Kohanim it says Yisa Hashem panim lecha. It seems that there is Nesias panim. Nitfal law. It says the word nitfal is chibur. In other words, he connected to a question in order to answer. Who is he? Rabbi Yossi HaKohen. Amar Allah, he said to him, Sholach Moshe, Lemad Ha'avodol Shenoshe B'chaver Mana. Somebody owes him a mana. Kavalos man b'fnei HaMelech. In that particular case, the lova in front of the king declared and committed himself to pay up the chov by a certain date. Not only that, for Nichbalo, he took a shvur that I'll pay you up on time, but Chaye HaMelech, in the life of the king. He gives man v'lo paro. When the time came, he did not pay back his loan. And that's Begia in Kvodo Shel Melech for two reasons. First of all, he committed himself in the presence of the king. And second of all, he swore by the name of the king. Qualifies Melech. He comes to ask for atonement to appease the king. The Amar Melech responds, Alboni mochel. I can be mochel for whatever insult you did to me. But lech upayeses kadvercha. But you were pogea, your friend, and that I can't help you. In other words, you didn't pay back the loan as you committed to do so. Now you owe him. So I can't be mochel on that. So Rabbi Yossi now explains the mashal, the nimshal, hachinami here too. And in the pasuk Yisa Hashem paravei lecha, it means that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is notzei panim umevater b'din. But that's only ba'vero shebein olam makom, because God says, you will pogea me, I can be mochel. However, and when it says Asher lo yisa upon him, there's no nesius upon him. That's ba'vero shebein olam makom. There you have to get ritzui from your friend. Ad shebah Rabbi Akiva the Rabbi Akiva offers an alternative reconciliation of these verses. Here we turn to that from Ches Kan Yisa Hashem Paravei Lecha Kodem Gzar Din. Then there'll be Nesias Panim. V'kan li achar Gzar Din. But here, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I'm not no say Panim, I'm not going to Korea the Din, that's after the Din was already signed and sealed. And that's against Rabbi Yochanan, who says that tshuva is meaningful to be Korea the Din even after the Gzar Din. Mar answers Hachinami b'Yachid. When Rabbi Akiva says that tshuva cannot be meaningful after the Gzar Din, he's talking about a Yachid who did tshuva. Rabbi Yochanan himself, as we said before, is talking about a tzibur. Okay, so here's where we're going to stop on the top of Yud Ches Amud Aleph, and let me wish you a great day. Thank you so much.